I remember this from 1941. It was December the 7th, and it was on a Sunday. And our farm was about, I don't know, 80 miles east of Memphis in a sort of a wooded area, and we had a general farm with all sorts of animals and so forth. And five of my brothers and sisters and my mom and dad lived in a house that had 5 rooms. And that was the old farmhouse. It had been there since the 1800s. And so we didn't have any electricity in the house. We didn't have any plumbing in the house. And the house had no insulation at all. So when it was getting dark about 5:30 or 6 o'clock, you would light a kerosene lamp, and that would be the only light that you had. So on this particular evening, the lamp was sitting on the end of the mantle by the fireplace. Now the fireplace was the only heat that we had in the house, and so the whole family would be grouped in this one room, and everybody would be kind of clustered around the fireplace. So the little kids, would be sitting here, there, maybe on the floor in someone's lap. So I was sitting beside the fireplace on a pile of logs or wood that had been brought in for to maintain the fire during the evening and in the morning. And it was 6 o'clock, already totally dark, and all the farm work had been finished, and we'd had a light supper, and we were all sitting there around the fire, and my father turned on the old battery-powered radio. It was a little radio that sat on a table, and the batteries were, they were about this big and this wide, and you plugged in the wiring into the batteries, and you could only, the batteries did not have a long life. You could recharge them, but during that period of time, you would not be allowed to play the radio maybe but 30 or 40 minutes a day, so that the battery life would be extended. So one of the rules was my dad had to listen to the news every night at 6 o'clock. The news would come out of a station in Memphis that might be relaying it from New York or major news centers. So we were sitting there, and I was working on my spelling words for the next day. And it was almost dark because that one little kerosene lamp was sitting on the side of the mantel just above me, and I could see my paper with my words, but everybody else was it was dim light. So when the news started, the first thing they said was, this morning at a certain time, and I don't remember the time, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. And then it went on to tell about the ships and the soldiers or the servicemen and everything that were involved. Not much else, not much details about how many planes, or did say that there was several ships damaged, but I was too little to really understand any of that. See, I was only in the 2nd grade. So after it was over, my dad turned off the radio, and nobody had anything to say. Now looking back on that, the reason I think that everybody was so stunned and so upset, unable to speak, was that one of my brothers was already in the service, and he was in the Navy, and 2 of my other brothers were in their late teens. So my parents knew that all 3 of these men would end up being in active duty, and indeed they were. And so my oldest brother, who was in the Navy, was on the Hornet when it was sunk, and the next brother was in the Air Force and was shot down over Germany and was a prisoner of war for 10 months, and the youngest brother was on a battleship and saw extreme action during the last days of the war. So I remember how all of that war news was what was controlling everything we did and everything we said in those days.